I'm kind of curious how you handle like confidentiality. Obviously, if you're selling a business, you don't want all the employees to know that the business is being sold in most circumstances, I would think, right? To
Correct.
avoid like a panic, quitting, or I don't know what you call it, mass
Yeah.
exodus. But how do you handle that confidentiality with your client? And then how do you transmit that into your marketing to keep that confidentiality?
So with the client, it's pretty easy because the client usually wants to maintain confidentiality, and that's part of your initial conversation with them. Your initial conversation, you're asking them for a private email address because you want to make sure that any emails that you send to them are not opened by their assistant. So, and you have that confidentiality conversation with them right then and there, and nothing good will happen from a breach of confidentiality. I literally have had clients who decided to tell their key employees that they were going to sell the business, and the key employees in this one case, there were three of them. They decided to hold the business hostage or hold the owner hostage and just said, hey, you're going to get a big paycheck when this sells. We want a piece of it. And so they ended up having, the owner ended up having to create contracts with them so that they would stay on board after the sale for a period of a year, give them a stay bonus and all of that. Um, None of that would have been necessary if the owner would have kept quiet, but he did that, um, against my advice, and that was the result. So most of the time, and particularly in small business transactions, most of the time the business or the employees don't know that the business has been sold until the day it closes or the day after. And then at that point, buyer and seller go into the business together, because the day of closing, actually there's two ways of doing it. You can have closing be at the end of the business day or at the beginning of the business day. Okay. So depending on how you structure that, your seller needs to determine in an asset purchase agreement, which is what most of them are with small businesses in the US. Your seller terminates all employees the day of closing or the day after, and your buyer hires all the employees, the ones that they want. And so that's how the employees learn that the business has been sold, because they're being terminated by one guy and hired by the other in the same day. It's like business has been, and it's a meeting with buyer and seller that explained everything to the employees, that explains, hey, there's going to be a transition period. Seller's not disappearing off the face of the earth. The seller's going to be around for the next month to make sure the transition goes smoothly and all that. But yeah, confidentiality is critical. So in terms of your marketing material, the advertising that you do regarding a business should not have any identifying information in it. So you definitely do not take pictures of the signage. You don't put the business name or address in it. You would say it's a pipeline welding inspection company, and and if hopefully there's more than one in Oklahoma. If there's more than one in a given county, then you can designate the county that it's in. Depending on, depending on the type of business and all that, you might have to get very broad and very generic. If you're dealing with a restaurant, it could be, you can get down to the city because there's usually more than one American restaurant or Mexican restaurant or whatever within a given city. And so just because you specify the type of food doesn't mean that it's identifying in any way. Okay. So typically in terms of confidentiality, you market it. You're marketing, if it's a small business in Biz by Sell, if it's larger, lower middle market, you're probably going out to specific targeted list of potential buyers, be it private equity groups or family offices or strategic buyers, other companies, competitors, but you're doing that in a different manner. If you're advertising on like a Biz by Sell for a small business, then You put your information in there. The inquiries come directly to you. When you get an inquiry about that business, you send a confidentiality agreement or an NDA for them to sign. They sign it, they return it back to you, and only then do you give them information that contains the name of the business and the address and other financial information and additional information about the operations and things like that. So IBDA calls it a CBR, a confidential business review, I think. M&A Source calls it a CIM, confidential information memorandum. They're pretty much the same. One's a little more detailed than the other, but in general, it's really just the confidential information or report that you're providing to a buyer after they've signed a confidentiality agreement. So that is how confidentiality is maintained. For the most part, you also tell most buyers understand they're signing that confidentiality agreement. They know it means that they keep information quiet. You will have on smaller businesses sometimes, Main Street, you'll have people that may decide, especially like a restaurant, they may decide to walk in and go have lunch or something like that, which is fine as long as they keep their mouth shut. But if they say something to the waiter about or waitress or the person at the counter, if it's fast food, and say, oh yeah, I'm thinking about buying this restaurant, completely inappropriate, right? So it's always a good idea for small businesses when you're dealing with possibly first-time buyers to have that conversation with them that just says, if you want to go in, have lunch, whatever, you act like a regular customer and you don't say a word about the business being for sale. The fact that the business is for sale is confidential, that in and of itself. Okay, so you just remind them.
Hey, quick follow-up, Tanya. So do you do like a screening process, when you have a confidential agreement in place? I mean, do you screen potential buyers? Like, what is that, like a pre-qual, or how does that work?
Depends on the business. It depends on the business. So for some businesses, yeah. If it requires specific skill set, if it requires specific licenses, you want to make sure they have the licenses or have the ability to get the licenses. If not, why give them any confidential information? If it's a little bit larger business, you want to make sure that they either have a pre-qual letter from an SBA lender or they have funds sufficient for a down payment. I remember years ago, I had an agent, there was a business we were marketing and I don't know, I think it was listed for $1.4 million or $2 million or something like that. So we were using these buyer profiles at the time. We would send out, along with the confidentiality agreement, we would send out a buyer profile and have the buyer fill that out and send it back to us. And so buyer profile comes back, says how much you have available for a down payment. It says 100. Okay, so we're figuring 100,000, which is not quite enough for $1.4 million, but usually they might be able to come up with something a little different. Partner with somebody, maybe have somebody else, a parent, a friend, or whatever. So the agent called the guy up, said, I see you're a little bit short on what would be necessary for down payment here. You've got about 100,000. He said, oh, no. I have $100. Said $100 to put down on a business. He was inquiring about a business that was $1.4 million or something. So yeah, funny things can happen.
So pre-qualification is appropriate sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah, on a little bit larger businesses. I mean, even on, if somebody only has $100 to put down on a business, they wouldn't be able to even qualify to buy, a restaurant for 75,000. So it's, I don't know. It just goes back to, again, kind of figuring out, their background experience and what type of buyer. If you're dealing with a small business like that, 75,000, 80,000, 100,000, even anything under $500,000, a lot of times you're getting first time buyers. And so there's a lot of a lot of what we do as business brokers is education. We're constantly educating sellers, educating buyers, educating other agents in some cases. And so it's it's all about education. So for buyers, yeah, if they're going to be a first time buyer, they've never bought a business before, so they don't understand the process. They don't know what they don't know, so they don't even know what to ask half of the time. So there's a lot of education that has to be done there in terms of trying to qualify. Like, you might have a buyer that comes to you and says, hey, I want to buy an auto body shop. It's like, okay, and maybe they have background in that. They've worked in an auto body shop before. They have good background and experience, so that's a plus. Maybe they managed one. That's even better. But financially, it's like, what do they have available to put down on a body shop? And you ask them, well, what's your investment level? And, what are you looking for in terms of, or what do you have liquid that you can invest in a business? Because sometimes they have other assets, but maybe they're not liquid, so they don't have cash that could be used for a down payment. So yeah, it's important to know those things.